Welcome to another Airbrush Asylum video. In this video tutorial, I'm going to show you how to airbrush a skull within some Fuchsia Candy flames. Let's get into the tutorial right now. You can see here I've already prepped up an aluminium composite panel. This has already been painted in a candy, and now I'm using a transparent black. So this is transparent base mixed with black and some reducer. And I'm using that to sketch in my dark shading for the skull. I've used a template, the positive part of the template from the Skull 74 AirShot stencils pack. And I'm basically just getting in all my groundwork. Like I said, just some of those darker shadows. And then I'm going to build on the skull now with a white. So this is Trident white mixed with reducer. I do like to over thin my paint. So I generally run at about 30% paint, 70% reducer. And the airbrush that I'm using here is the GSI Krios PS770. This one has a 0.18mm needle nozzle setup. I'm just getting those edges in nice and clean, freehand. Again, if you can't do this freehand, this template set actually comes with a negative as well. So you could definitely utilize that negative part of the template to get those sharp edges. And I'm just working on the teeth now. So building up that ground coat that I'm going to need to build my candy on top of it. So same sort of procedure, just working through the whole skull, defining all the areas. So now that I've got most of my underpainting done, I'm coming in with the Texture 5 template, also by AirShot stencils, and I'm just adding a bit of texture to the skull just to grunge it up a little bit. So I don't want to go overboard, I'm just sort of hitting certain areas. Just moving that template around. So now I'm going to work on the first layer of flame. So I'm using my Fire Tool template set, and I'm just getting some of those flame licks into place. So essentially what I'm doing is using the template and its edges to get one defined edge, and then generally the other side will be freehand. So that way you establish a little bit of the flow, and it's not too stencily and it's also not too loose with just going completely freehand. So try to imagine the fire flowing off the skull, so how that would interact with that skull, and then replicate that. If you need to, get yourself a reference image and then follow that. So these flames are going to be just a single color, so very similar to the base color of the actual panel. Now for those of you that are watching and you're looking at this panel and the color of it and you're thinking, oh, this looks very familiar, you'd be right. I've done numerous sample panels. This is for the hot rod project that I was meant to be doing this year, but it's looking like it's more like next year now. There's been some engineering issues, so they've got to get sorted out first before the hot rod gets painted, and then it's ready for me to airbrush. So we're still in the sample process and doing these sample panels to establish what the customer actually likes, and then that's what I'll be airbrushing on the vehicle. So that's why you may have already seen one of the videos which relates to this project, and if you haven't seen any of these videos, I will link them up in the description below, so go check them out. You'll see how I did some different types of skulls, as well as some water-based versus urethane flames to showcase to the customer as well. We're getting there slowly. Okay, so now that I've established the first layer of flame, I'm going to come in with the Fuchsia Candy by DNA Custom Paints, and I'm going to tone over all of the white section of the flame as well as the skull. Now, because it's a candy, candy basically means it's completely transparent, so they call it candy because it's like a lollipop. And if you look through a lollipop, you can see that really rich color, but you can see how heavily transparent it is, and that's why this paint is called candy. It is a lot more difficult to paint because of the fact that it is so transparent, so very easy to get it patchy. It's not that difficult to use when you're airbrushing candy over an artwork. You need to be a little bit more aware of your overlaps, but because the artwork is there, it allows you to sort of mask the patchiness if you do get any. And the other thing with candy is the more you coat it, the color will get richer and richer, but there will be a point where it will just go too dark, so you've got to find that sweet spot. And obviously none of this really pops until you clear it, so it's going to look a little bit messy throughout the video, but in the end I urge you to stick around. I'll show you the completed cleared artwork, and this particular one I actually cleared using a resin, so it's got a real deep sheen on it. Now here's a bit of a mistake that I thought I'd leave in. This is a very, very bad mistake, and do not do this. I accidentally added water into this automotive Fuchsia Candy instead of reducer. The bottles looked a little similar and they were on my tray. There's no excuse for it, but hey, I thought perfect, I'll leave it in. And it actually reacted a little bit. So what I did was I just dried it off, and now I've worked back over it with some candy. You can see that sort of ring, that ugly ring that we've got left there. To eliminate that little bubble that you saw, what I did was I put a bit of reducer in the airbrush and sprayed that over the top very carefully after drying it, and that tended to melt it back into the surface. Not ideal to do, but hey, it worked, and I got to show you this mistake and how to fix it. That little mark will disappear in the end, so don't worry about that. Now, a step that we just sort of missed as I was talking about the repair of that mistake was the SG 100 Intercoat Clear by House of Colour. So all I did was I sealed the candy, so sprayed over the entire artwork with that Intercoat Clear, and all that does is it'll help to protect it seeping through when I clear coat it. So now that the SG 100 has had a little bit of time to dry, I am coming in with the Trident White again. And what I'm doing is just picking up a couple of the extreme highlights of this skull just to make it pop a little bit. So if this is the first time watching one of our videos, then welcome. For all of our regular viewers, welcome back. I do hope that you're enjoying this video tutorial so far. If you are, give it a thumbs up, share it out, and let's build this airbrushing community together. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing, tap on that bell icon, and that will notify you every time I put out new content. Now back with the fire tool set, and going to pick out some of those flames. So I'm focusing on what I've got here. So usually when I'm doing fire, I would do the first layer, and then the next layer would be completely different. It wouldn't relate to that first layer at all. But because I'm doing a single color candy fire, what I'm actually doing is working this layer sort of in conjunction with that original base layer that I've got already laid out. Alright, so that way I'm kind of hitting some of those highlights and trying to bring a little bit of more depth to that, but I'm not adjusting the whole shape of the flame. So it's just a little bit of a different way of looking at it, that's all. And now coming back in with the texture template and and just pulling out some of the texture as well with that white before I apply another layer of the Fuchsia Candy. Okay, so back in now with the Fuchsia Candy, and I'm dusting back over the flame and the skull. I'm going over the majority of it, but I don't want it to be as saturated as the first layer, so I still want to give it the impression that there are two layers. We don't want to just flatten it off totally. So you can see here, even though I've got decent sort of coverage, it's not as saturated. So you can still see that second layer. And now back with the Intercoat Clear and sealing that one off as well. And now I'm starting again with the white. Apologies for the background noise, that's the extraction fan. It got a little bit fumey in the studio, so I had to switch that one on even whilst I was doing the white. So again, you can see I'm just hitting those key highlights, but now this layer is really lifting it up again. So I've got those two previous layers, and now this white layer is kind of my final layer to really make certain areas, certain hot spots or white highlights pop, and to really help to shape the skull. I'm going a little bit more detailed with this one as well, so I'm up nice and close, as you can see, with the teeth, just to get that real sharp defined edge. And just trying to shape it just using that white. Again, less is more, so you don't want to overdo it. Adding a little bit of texture as well, as you can see here and there, but again, I'm not going crazy at this stage with the highlights. Now again, using my flame template, really adding that layer of flame in and around the skull, so it looks like the skull is engulfed within the fire, not just either sitting on top or totally behind. You want sort of those layers to work in and around the skull. Here we go again with the Fuchsia Candy. One last time to just tone it down. Eliminate any areas that I don't like that little section there. Wasn't really happy with that. You can see it's got more of a 3D appearance now, which is cool. And this time just sort of letting the overspray tone the flames down a little bit so that they're not so harsh. They look like they're emerging from that initial layers of the flame. And again with the Intercoat Clear, sealing it off. And then here we have just a quick shot of the artwork completed before the clear. Now stick around because I'm going to show you what it looks like once it's all resined. So for this particular project, I would normally 2-pack clear, but I've been enjoying really using the artwork resin. So I've poured that over the panel instead. So after applying the resin has sucked that candy dye through to the top and effectively now toned down some of my highlights. So what I'm going to do is just coming back in with white, I'm going to brighten up another tone. So I've sanded the resin. So that's now protected and the candy can't bleed through. Because what I've done is just like you would with clear coat, I've allowed that to dry. And now I'm working back over the top of that dried coating. Just going to hit some of these highlights. I'll just work on teeth, re-brighten some of those highlights as well. So I'll leave it at that and then re-resin it. Here is the completed resin artwork. You can see that gloss, very cool. And how much it really pops now. Really gives it a sense of depth. So hopefully the customer will be happy. So to continue your learning, be sure to check out some of the other videos and playlists that I've got listed here. And until next time, go grab your airbrush, do some amazing artwork yourself, and I'll see you again very, very soon in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.